Ambassador, it's a pleasure to have you here today at Radio Free Europe in Pristina.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
I will start with a dialogue. Last week, Kosovo and Serbia held talks in Brussels, but no progress was made. In US's view, is there a particular party that deserves greater blame for this?
Well, you probably saw our public statement after the meeting between the two leaders on the facilitation of the EU on the 14th of September. And from the State Department, we expressed our disappointment that more progress, or that progress had not been made. We, to a large extent, support the EU-facilitated dialogue, and we support the conclusions of the facilitators, in this case, High Representative Borrell and EU Special Representative Lajčák. So there's a set of facts here. The set of facts is a meeting was held, difficult discussions took place, work was done towards trying to reach agreement on a sequenced plan to implement the Ohrid Agreement. And I want to be clear from a U.S. perspective, we expect both sides to fully implement all of their obligations and commitments in Ohrid and its implementation annex. And as High Representative Borrell said in his press remarks afterwards, at the end of the day, he put forward a compromise way forward that ultimately Serbia accepted and Kosovo did not. Mm-hmm. That's unfortunate, and our hope would be that the government of Kosovo will also find a way to work with the EU facilitators to find a common way forward.
But then what happened on Thursday? Why couldn't the government find that way common before that?
Yeah, it's hard for me to answer. I wasn't there, and there were no U.S. officials present for this particular round. Sometimes we have better insight. So I can't answer the question. My understanding is that the government of Kosovo has had some specific concerns about the timing of the work to move forward with a credible process to negotiate the statute for an association of Serb majority municipalities. And it has been a U.S. request and a U.S. expectation for the government of Kosovo as well that that work will start, and it will start fairly soon. It's an urgent element of implementing Ohrid. Now again, I want to be clear. We do expect both sides to fully implement all of their obligations and commitments under Ohrid and its implementation annex. But it's not a secret that we've been saying for a while that one of those commitments is moving forward the association, and that one in particular needs to move forward with some real urgency. So that is our hope.
So what is the U.S.'s opinion on the sequencing of the steps of the implementation of the plan? Is Kosovo being now asked to implement the association first, and then to get the de facto recognition from Serbia, or should this go at the same time? This was part of the plan, actually, that the Prime Minister presented on Thursday, that he would rather have de facto recognition and then start with association.
So, again, if you listen closely to what High Representative Borrell said after the meeting, he said that he suggested as a way forward to parallel tracks, that there was need to move forward rather urgently with a credible process to develop a statute for the association as one piece of this. And this is the main thing that we have been asking of Kosovo with regards, hardest thing, but the main thing we've been asking of Kosovo to do with regard to implementing Ohrid. But at the same time, parallel, there'd be work on these political things, the implementation of the commitments on normalization of relations. From an outside observer, that seems like a reasonable thing, parallel processes, parallel tracks. You have to give a little and get a little, and we could spend a lot of time on who does what, when exactly, and in what order. But let's be honest, at the end of the day, both things need to happen. Kosovo has got to start moving forward with the association.
So that has to be the first one?
That has to be among the very first steps. I mean, that's what we've been saying for a long time. There's an urgency to this. We also do look to Serbia to fulfill its commitments under the Ohrid Agreement.
But Kurti is not agreeing to it.
My understanding is Prime Minister Kurti did not, of course, accept the proposal put on the table by the High Representative and Miroslav Lajčák. And that's unfortunate from our perspective. That maybe is an opportunity for me to make another point as well, because I've seen a lot of concern and criticism of the European Union facilitators. And I just have to say, from a U.S. perspective, we don't share that criticism. That is not our assessment of the circumstance. Miroslav Lajčák enjoys strong confidence from the European Union. They made a statement 2 days ago making that point, and for the High Rep. But he also enjoys strong confidence from the United States of America. We've worked with him in other contexts. We've worked with him here. And I have to say, it is not our assessment that he is doing Serbia's bidding or becoming compromised in some way. We see a very capable, adept diplomat trying to find a way forward that is capable of achieving agreement from two very, very opposed parties on a sensitive set of issues. and we commend him for his work.
But given that you said that the U.S. does support the EU and Borrell and Lajčák too, however, Kurti thinks that Miroslav Lajčák has sided with Belgrade, and he also called him to be one-sided, not neutral, and not fair. What happens if Prime Minister Kurti decides not to cooperate with Lajčák anymore?
You know, I don't really like answering hypothetical questions. My hope and expectation is the government of Kosovo will work with the designated representatives of the European Union to, again, achieve together this strategic goal. So again, why do we have Ohrid? From a United States perspective, the whole purpose of this entire exercise is to fulfill a vision of seeing Kosovo more closely integrated and fully integrated into European and Euro-Atlantic structures. It means Kosovo moving towards the European Union. It means Kosovo moving towards NATO. It means dealing with some of these hindrances in the past that have gotten in the way of that. The only way to do that is through progress in the dialogue. Now, the United States supports normalization of relations between Kosovo and Serbia, which is what the Ohrid Agreement is supposed to do, as a really important step towards our longer-term goal of mutual recognition, but we think this is what is achievable right now. And it needs to happen, because without it, Kosovo's path towards Europe is constrained. I brought with me the EU statement that was just issued 2 days ago. There's one provision I think is really important to highlight. One of the last paragraphs, they say, the European Union reminds the parties that the European path of both Kosovo and Serbia goes through the EU-facilitated dialogue and through the normalization of their relations. Both risk losing opportunities for progressing on their European paths. We completely subscribe to that. We see the dialogue as the way forward. So, going to your question, our hope would be the government of Kosovo also sees this strategic opportunity and finds a way to, and all of us involved find a way to find a common way forward that results in both parties fully implementing all of their obligations and commitments under this agreement. And for Kosovo, one of the most important obligations is moving forward with a credible process on a statute for the Association of Serb Majority Municipalities. While I'm on that point, there's one more point I'd like to make, and that is, I completely understand, we completely understand the concerns by many in the government of Kosovo that an association could end up being something that negatively affects, if not destroys, the effective functioning of the state. I want to say, I've said it before, but I take every opportunity to say it again. I want to be very clear of the United States' vision of an association. We believe it needs to be completely consistent with Kosovo's current constitution. We believe it needs to be completely consistent with the 2016 Constitutional Court decision. We do not believe that it should have executive authorities or powers. We think it should be consistent with commitments made by the EU, the Mogherini letter. We laid this all out very clearly in a public document signed by the Counselor of the Department of State, Derek Chalet, and the Deputy Assistant Secretary and Special Envoy for the Balkans, Gabe Escobar. I've said this a number of times. There needs, I think, we would hope that there would be some level of trust. We are supporting this process, that when we say this, we mean this, and we do. And so we will work with the government of Kosovo and others to ensure that this thing, which we believe is necessary, it's an important tool to respond to concerns of the ethnic Serb community in Kosovo, but that it is done in a way that doesn't have these ancillary negative effects that seem to be such a concern by the government.
But you believe that, Kosovo believes that, the EU believes that it has to be done in line with the Constitutional Court decision. Serbia doesn't believe that.
So I would agree that it would appear that Serbia has a different vision. But that doesn't mean that the Kosovo cannot go forward with an association that addresses the concerns of the ethnic Serb community in Kosovo or puts them in a better status while still being faithful to all of these constraints I just laid out. And that's what we are asking of Kosovo.
And what if Serbia doesn't accept that and asks for more?
Well, Serbia can ask for more, but at the end of the day, this is what the United States and the international community is prepared to see as acceptable.
And what are the guarantees that it will not end up as Republika Srpska at some point?
I think there has to be some trust in the United States and in the commitments we've made that we won't allow that, that we agree that it should not be that, and we're serious about it.
I would also like to know your opinion. Is the association being pushed to give more rights to Serb community in Kosovo? Or is it a greater move by the West, making sure that Serbia is satisfied and trying to create a greater distance between Serbia and Russia?
I can speak to my motivations. I have spent a lot of years of my life working on different pieces of this Kosovo puzzle. I served with Marti Ahtisaari at the time of the development of the Ahtisaari plan. I worked with William Walker when I was at our mission to the OSCE. I worked in Kosovo at the National Security Council at the time of the International Court of Justice ruling and other things. What's motivating me is ensuring that this government is sufficiently responsive to this very sensitive issue of the ethnic Serb community in Kosovo, that they want to be able to exercise certain rights in certain ways, consistent with Kosovo law, consistent with Kosovo's constitution, and that it's important to give them some of that space to do so. That's what's motivating the United States here.
And what if this government doesn't respond to that and does not cooperate on the association?
Well, again, that's a bit of a hypothetical question. The Prime Minister has said he understands Kosovo's obligations to establish an association. Where things seem to be stuck right now is on the specific question just of in what order do we implement an agreement that we believe is a very important agreement for both countries. My hope would be the Prime Minister will understand that he's probably going to have to do this earlier than he might like to be able to move these other things forward, but for the benefit of the country.
And if he doesn't?
Well, then I think we're stuck for a little while and there'll be consequences, but I think we want to avoid that.
Yeah, is the United States reconsidering its support to Kosovo?
When I say consequences, I'm not talking about specific measures, I'm just talking about lost opportunities. So I don't know how the United States could amend its support for Kosovo with regard to our commitment to the people of Kosovo and to the idea of Kosovo as a sovereign, independent, multi-ethnic, democratic state. And of course, we spend so much time and effort in advancing this vision of Kosovo being what it is, a small to medium-sized Western Balkan state that is fully integrated into European and Euro-Atlantic structures. Our vision for a Europe whole and free and at peace can't be realized without Kosovo being part of this. And so that's why we put so much effort in. That's how we see it.
Going back to the association, I know that Mr. Escobar back in December did mention the possibility of looking for alternative partners to create the association. Is the United States still looking for those?
I think what Mr. Escobar meant when he said that is if the government doesn't want to put ideas forward, there are civil society groups and others who could and would. I think we all understand at the end of the day, it is the government of Kosovo only that can put forward provisions that the government of Kosovo will accept and implement. We do talk to a lot of partners in a lot of different ways about what are some ideas of how you can do this. How can you respond to the concerns of the ethnic Serb community in a manner that, you know, that is compliant with these guardrails I laid out, the Constitution, the Constitutional Court decision, and all the rest. There's a lot of creative ideas out there. So I think that's what he meant.
All right. If Kosovo leadership continues on this path like it acted on Thursday, could there be a point where there can be a permanent damaging of relations between Kosovo and the United States?
That's a hard question to answer. And again, it's a bit of a hypothetical question. What I would say is we want to see good partnership with this government moving forward with a shared agenda. We both want to see Kosovo take its place in European and Euro-Atlantic structures. We, the United States, believe that that is only achievable through progress in the dialogue. And I think the government agrees with that too, but we are stuck right now a little bit on the best ways to do this and the way forward. So what we're trying to focus on, and what I believe Miroslav Lajčák and Josip Borrell and others are trying to focus on, is how do we do this in a way that, because you've got two parties negotiating, how do we do this in a way that allows both parties to have some of what they're looking for, some of what they want, but that is satisfactory in moving forward.
Do you have patience?
We're diplomats. So I think one of the qualities of a good diplomat is strategic patience.
I would move to the north a bit and talk about the north. Did de-escalation happen in the north, according to you?
Well, there's been some de-escalation, but again, if I can quote the EU statement that we completely agree with, it says very clearly that there have been steps taken, but that the steps taken thus far are insufficient and the security situation in the north remains tense. I think that's an accurate portrayal of the situation right now. We welcomed the initial steps taken by the government of Kosovo to do some of the things we'd asked the government of Kosovo to do to help reduce tensions in the north. But we don't believe the tensions have been fully reduced, nor has the government taken all of the actions that the EU and we originally asked it to take. So this is still a work in progress. There is more that can be done, and we're deeply concerned about other action that could increase escalation. So the EU statement refers to concerns we have about evictions from public buildings, moving forward with expropriation of land and other things that could make this harder and enhance tensions. Just as we've expressed criticism of some of the actions taken by Serbia that have also increased tension. Some of this, these threats against police officers who are doing their best to support the government of Kosovo in its responsibilities to enforce the rule of law in the north.
What else do you expect to happen in the north in order to a full de-escalation? In
order to achieve de-escalation?
Yes.
Well, I think it's good to go back to what we have been asking for all along and what was described in the initial EU statement. I think it was the 3rd of June. We asked that the Kosovo police no longer operate in the vicinity of the municipal buildings. We asked that the mayors work from alternative locations. Some have, some haven't. And we asked that new elections be scheduled fairly urgently. And we asked that the Serbs participate in those elections without conditions.
Okay, so how do you foresee these elections taking place?
That's a great question. Right now I don't have an answer. The government of Kosovo has put into place a legal framework that would allow the elections to go forward, and we appreciate that and we welcome that. I will say as well that there's some conversation, the process that's been put in place that requires a percentage of registered voters to sign a petition that then requires some kind of a recall referendum and then subsequently require some sort of voting. While legal and possible, it is complex. And so as my colleague Gabe Escobar has said, there's also the possibility of the mayors just resigning. We know that also triggers new elections because that's what triggered the prior elections. I would say that I don't know what the process will be. And I also would say that the elections make sense when we know the Serbs are going to participate. As I said, one of the EU expressions of desire from their recent statement, and one of the things we have said as well, is the whole point of the elections is to de-escalate tensions in the north. That only happens if the Serbs participate. So one of the things we're also looking for is for the Serbs in the north to accept. They live in Kosovo. They are citizens in the Kosovan legal system. They need to participate in the democratic processes to make sure that their rights are advanced and respected.
You expected this also in April. They didn't.
We asked them to. They made the choice not to, and they were, and unfortunately we have the outcome we have right now.
So would the de-escalation now also depend on their decision if they're going to vote or not?
Well, I think in practical terms, yes, the situation will be less tense. There will be less, it will be a less tense environment if municipal elections take place with the participation of the Serbs and the citizens in the north feel like they are being represented by the political institutions. In a practical sense, yes.
Ambassador, both High Representative Borrell and State Department said that time is running out. Can Kosovo and Serbia risk the international attention in future with upcoming electoral processes, both in the EU and the United States?
I believe we are currently in a moment that gives real opportunity for both Kosovo and Serbia to move forward and to leave behind some of the things that have impeded their mutual trajectories. And I think that moment is not infinite. There are a number of things that could constrain that moment. Some are electoral processes in Europe and in the United States. Some are also just the extent to which we manage to make progress before flashpoints and violence overcome the circumstances. And so again, our advice here in Priština to the government in Kosovo, which I'm responsible for, is take advantage of this opportunity, which is not infinite. Move with urgency, constructively in the dialogue. See the dialogue as what it is. The opportunity to reposition your relationship with Serbia and to further advance your integration into European and Euro-Atlantic structures. And patience is not going to be unlimited with regard to taking advantage of this opportunity or putting in significant efforts from high-level political people to try to advance this. We're very committed to seeing Kosovo advance, but we can't care more than the government of Kosovo.
Thank you so much, Ambassador, for this interview.
All right. Thank you. It was a pleasure.